the Wednesday, March 4th, 2020 morning session of the Portland City Council. Good morning. Carla, please call the roll.
Good morning. Fritz.
Here.
Hardesty.
Here.
Udaly. Wheeler.
Here. Now we'll hear from legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. If it does not, you may be ruled out of order. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you are in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do so with a thumbs up. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Please remain seated at council chambers unless entering or exiting. If you are filming the proceedings, please do not use bright lights or disrupt the meeting. Disruptive conduct such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for your helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Very good. Thank you. First up is communications. Carla?
Item 172, request of Cheryl Graves to address council regarding the present state of the city's homeless crisis. She will not be coming.
All right. Very good. Next is 173, please.
Request of Antoine Truss to address council regarding the homelessness epidemic.
Is she here? No. Sorry. All right. Next up
Item
is
174.
174.
Request of Jan Campbell to address council regarding a tribute to Commissioner Fish. She sends her apologies. She is not feeling well.
175.
Request of Daniel Somerville White to address council regarding a resolution supporting ethnogenic plant practices.
Ah, interesting.
Not here either.
Wow.
Darn. Was there something
That
we said?
actually, I actually was really interested to hear what that was. I guess I'll have to stay in suspense. 176, please.
Request of Sean Green to address council regarding his experience as a member of the Development Review Advisory Committee and the Bureau of Development Services Budget Advisory Committee.
Very good, and I know Mr. Green is here. Good morning. It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
And I do appreciate the fact that there's a number of people who called in and said they thought they might be sick, and I appreciate they're taking that extra step to protect everybody, and we'll make sure we can rotate them back in as they feel better. Right. Mr. Green, welcome. Thank you for being here.
And they're going to distribute my testimony. My name is Sean Green. I own a general contracting business called Aforma and serve as vice chair of the Northeast Coalition of Neighborhoods. Over 3 years ago, Commissioner Udaly's chief of staff, Marshall Runkle, urged me to get involved with the Development Review Advisory Committee, also known as DRAC. At this table a year ago during my appointment, I was asked by Commissioner Fritz how well I could serve the neighborhood interests given the fact that I'm also a contractor. My response was that I've been involved in service to my community for most of my life and much longer than I've been a contractor. Further, the fact that I've had firsthand experience with permitting, inspections, and general contracting process gives me the advantage when discussing a particular topic. The fact that I have a master's of public administration from the Hatfield School of Government doesn't hurt either. I have taken volunteer service to the extreme at BDS, serving on numerous committees, including chairing the Process Improvement and Technology Committee, as a member of the BDS Budget Advisory Committee, the Financial Advisory Committee, and the Demolition Subcommittee. And last month, I volunteered to serve on the newly formed Public Works Committee. I have great pleasure getting to know better the amazing people who work at BDS. While it's never been perfect, one of the most inspiring aspects of Portland is our history of working together to try to better our city. I'm here in that spirit. The most successful organizations in the world make a commitment to continual improvement and center their work around respect for people. The defensive, knee-jerk, reactionary response that is prevalent in our world, including many aspects of our city government, is doing our city a great disservice. The fastest way to lose the immense value that is being added through civic engagement and the even greater potential value that could be added through civic engagement is by people getting the feeling that their voice doesn't matter and that the effort they put into making a positive difference will be for nothing. My civic engagement issues are what some might call, many civic engagement issues are what some might call wicked problems, or problems that do not have a clear and easy solution and are often underpinned by incommensurate values. These are the times when we most need a diverse and thoughtful community to come together. A number of my recent efforts to make our city better have been emotionally taxing and have resulted in official city response or a lack of a response that is hurtful. The way in which each of you, your staff, and the various city bureaus interact with each other in the community matters. Each of you set the standards for our city, and people follow your lead, even more than you may realize. I love my city, and I respect and honor the commitment each of you have made to serve our community, an often thankless task, and one that I can only imagine is also emotionally taxing. I'm here to support each of you and the work that you do to make our city better. Thank you.
Mayor,
Commissioner Daly, then
I have
Commissioner
a
Hardesty, and
few
then.
questions
Good,
for Sean
thank you.
Green. So since we didn't take testimony last week during the hearing about the demolition rules, we didn't get to hear from all stakeholders, and I have a few prepared questions for you. First, as someone who's been deeply involved in the demolition debate, do you believe the inspection protocol as it stands now will work?
The demolition subcommittee did some really great work to improve the inspection protocol and to address nearly everyone's concerns. I think at this point, it's best to monitor the new process we have and to make improvements as necessary to achieve our goals. I will say that I wish we had come to this place faster and with less effort.
I agree. Do you have any constructive criticism for how we could have caught and addressed the inspection problem sooner?
I wish we had a culture that was committed to continual improvement, such that when someone brings up an opportunity for an improvement that is not met with resistance. The most successful organizations seek out problems as part of a commitment to striving for perfection. In general, I could sum up my feelings as, first, if we're going to have a policy, let's follow it. And if we feel like there's aspects about a policy that should be changed, let's change it. And second, always be willing to listen and solicit feedback. You know, I'd be happy to drill into specifics with anyone at another time.
Thanks. Do you have any based on your analysis, how many demolitions likely occurred that did not comply with the new rules after they were adopted?
I think if we define during demolition in the common sense way of when the excavator is knocking down a house, that the data that we started collecting at the end of September 2019 shows that we did not often have an inspector on site to see the demolition in progress and to ensure that the demolition was being conducted in a way that complies with our laws. Given that a correction notice and that violations can only be issued when observed by an inspector, we need to be more critical of program data that is used, that uses the number of correction notices and violations as an indication of how well the program is operating. You know, I think most programs would be well served by critically examining the metrics we use to determine success.
Okay. So the primary reason why I work to develop and pass these demolition regulations is because there is no safe lead exposure in children. I feel like I was less vocal than I wanted to be last week. It is sometimes hard to criticize city staff from the dais, but I do want to express my deep frustration with how this was handled. I talk about sometimes that bureaus are moving at different geologic speeds than council offices, and it's hard to redirect these giant machines It's also hard when staff doesn't actually support new rules and regulations or doesn't enforce the letter or the spirit of the rules. So I'm very disappointed that this, important regulations we put in place to protect children from permanent brain damage was not implemented adequately by the Bureau. Exposure to lead can seriously harm a child's health and cause well-documented adverse effects such as damage to the brain and nervous system, slowed growth and development, learning and behavior problems, hearing and speech challenges. This can impact cognitive ability, decrease ability to pay attention, and of course that can often lead to challenges in school. Childhood lead poisoning is 100% preventable. That was the intent of the regulations, and again, I'm disappointed that the regulations were not implemented well, and I'm very grateful to you, Sean, and other activists who worked to correct the situation.
I think it's important to recognize, and I recognize this, that the people actually implementing the regulations, the folks on the ground doing the inspections, are doing their best to uphold the law and to serve our city well. That particular program, I think, fell into a category where there was some organizational chaos. We had a new to the state division manager brought in, who's an amazing person doing great work. A new middle manager was was promoted to work on that program. And then the line level manager went from managing one inspector to managing 4, and they needed to be trained up on these new regulations. So I recognize, I don't want it to seem as though I'm critical of the staff actually doing this work, but I think when it comes time to review a program, there's ways to do it, in a way that are thoughtful and open to positive improvements.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Commissioner Udaley, for your questions. I first just want to say, Sean, any community members who volunteer their time to try to make the city better have my deep appreciation. So thank you for your willingness, because many times, of course, these committees operate behind the scenes, and so there's no glory to being a volunteer on a city oversight board. Having said that, I think what I've learned through this process is it is helpful always when we have oversight boards that have a responsibility to work with the Bureau, that when we hear presentations, we should always hear from the advisory committees as well. Because just like with the stadium, the advisory committee has a very different perspective than the professional folks who come and present in front of us. And so I have a great deal of respect for all the city employees and the hard work that they do. But we can't make good decisions unless we're hearing all sides of the issues. And which is why I try to be very intentional about asking very direct questions. And I am troubled that when I ask a direct question and I get an answer that's less than enlightening, that is not I do not want to reward that kind of behavior, right? I mean, I think we can only make good decisions when we have all the facts in front of us. And so maybe as a council, we need to reconsider how we hear those reports and who we hear from. And so I want to end where I started, which is thank you very much for your willingness to volunteer, and thank you for your courage to actually find avenues to have your voice heard, whether or not they were appreciated on the committee you served on. So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you for taking the time to come in this morning. It's really helpful to have a kind of a follow-up session. I asked you the question last year to put on the record because I know that some people do have the thought of...
I know.
Yes, and you gave a good answer, and I just wanted to say again for the record that you've done an exemplary job of representing all, a number of different viewpoints, and thank you for your work on the committee.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Interesting conversation. Appreciate it. Thank you. And I'm glad we were able to dive a little deeper since nobody else was able to come for communications today.
I obviously missed something really interesting last week. Sorry about that. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you for your service. So next up, let's see, actually, the consent agenda. We have a consent agenda this week. That's new and exciting. Have any items been pulled from the consent agenda?
We've had no requests.
Very good. Please call the roll on the consent agenda.
Fritz?
My mother says thank you very much for excusing my absence for the past 2 weeks. She had a wonderful 90th birthday. Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Wheeler?
We're glad to have you back, Commissioner. I vote aye. The consent agenda is adopted. First time certain item, please, is number 177, please.
Amend the fiscal year 2019-20 budget and authorize construction financing in an amount not to exceed $2,177,000 to DePaul Treatment Centers or affiliate to construct a new treatment facility at Southeast 102nd Avenue and Southeast Cherry Blossom Drive.
Very good. Good morning, everyone. In the fall bump, as you'll recall, council allocated general fund dollars to the DePaul Treatment Center to help increase the capacity of the treatment beds in our community. This new development, which you'll hear about shortly, will ensure new opportunity for those with addictions to receive both residential and day treatment programming, and our contribution, which now includes additional resources from the Portland Housing Bureau, will ensure that a portion of those beds will be affordable. I want to thank the DePaul Treatment Center, Girding Edeland, and the Gateway community for their incredible vision related to this project. I'll now turn it over to Director Callahan, who's not here, so I'm turning it over to you guys, and you'll sort it out for me. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor
morning.
Wheeler and Commissioner. I'm
Got Molly.
Molly Rogers, the Deputy Director of the Portland Housing Bureau. I'm here standing in for Shannon Callahan, who
Thanks,
couldn't be
Molly.
here today. I am delighted to introduce Marie Wacker, who's the CEO of DePaul Treatment Centers, and Carly Harrison, who is Development Manager at Girding Edeland. They're the development consultants working on the project.
Great. Marie, Carly, thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Just this is a rendering of what the new facility is going to look like on 102nd and Southeast Cherry Avenue. There will be a total of 70 adult treatment beds provided in this new facility. 24 of them will be medically withdrawal management beds. And additionally, will be paired with a 80-person day treatment facility that is expecting to serve almost 1,000 outpatient clinics a year. This is a rendering of the courtyard view, which includes community gardens and beautiful residential and outdoor community spaces that is meant to be a healing place. We have many partners, and we're leveraging many resources in this project. PHB's resources will support 10 of the 70 treatment beds. Those will be regulated to be affordable for households earning less than 60% of area median income, and those will be regulated for a period of 60 years. Where the 2.2 million is leveraging about another 20 million or 27 million of other resources from mostly from DePaul Treatment Centers, as well as new market tax credits, other private leveraging, and other private donations to make the project work. And I'm just going to turn it over to, actually, I believe Carly. Oh, and Marie, if you want to share anything about the type of folks who are coming into the treatment center, what are they experiencing, any of the demographics you can share in the
Sure.
program, the services.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler, members of the council.
Feel free to move that closer if it's more comfortable.
So first of all, I want to express our deep appreciation for the city's support in making this project happen. We simply could not do it without all of you, and in particular the mayor's office, Kristen Dennis and other members of that team, and Director Callahan and her team as well. We are expecting to serve over 5,000 people for addiction treatment co-occurring mental health services. The majority of our individuals have an alcohol addiction, about 50%, another 40% opioid use, and the meth piece of the business is definitely increasing in terms of people's addiction, which is unfortunate given its potential long-term impacts on their physical health and their mental health. About 1/3 of our patients are homeless when they come to us, and everyone who graduates and completes the program, we make sure they have a place to go to when they leave, as well as we've offered attaining a job and those kinds of other skills as well. And about almost 1/3, about 28% of our patients come from communities of color. So we are very excited to bring this project to the community. In addition to the treatment services, we will have a new endeavor which is about community education. So we really have plans to offer speaker series, small community gatherings on a bi-monthly basis on different topic areas in addiction and prevention, and we hope to provide a greater community resource that will help educate and reduce the stigma related to this disease.
Commissioner Fritz, then Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you for being here. Is it for men and women?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
And I'm assuming the demographics are going to change radically based on the community that you are moving into. And so I'm curious about how staffing is going to reflect the needs of this very diverse community that speaks about 52 languages, and which is a lot different from your former location. And let me just say, I am thrilled. This is my neighborhood. I am so thrilled. I can't wait. We desperately need this in East Portland. But I am concerned that that without staffing that really reflects the community you're now going to serve, that we may not be as effective as we need to be.
I thank you for your question. Currently today, about a little over 1/3 of our staff are from communities of color. We have several other than English speakers on our staff, but I would wholeheartedly concur that the opportunity to build even deeper resources in those areas is something that this organization will be and is focusing on.
And you said that you, people who successfully complete your program have housing at the end.
Yes.
Is this housing that's housing that they can permanently afford to live in, or is this housing that they're still going to be housing insecure a month later?
I don't know that I can fully answer that question. I can tell you that we are in the position lots of times that we are paying first month's rent in order to stabilize them, and they have had an opportunity about 30 days before they graduate to work and save. Most of the housing is Oxford housing. We have other partnerships with Central City Concern, Bridges to Change, and other entities that provide housing services.
I didn't know we had Oxford housing in Portland.
We have a lot.
Do we have a lot?
Yeah, we
Oh,
do.
we got to talk. I got to learn more about what's in my own community. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
I have some broad questions, and these are entirely unfair questions, and you may not have the answers. But I spend a good portion of my day and my evenings talking about addiction. And as you indicated, this is predominantly focused on alcohol addiction, substance abuse. But as I'm sure you're keenly aware, we're seeing more drug addiction in our community. We're seeing more of our houseless population becoming addicted to meth and other substances. And there are times when it feels that our system is being overwhelmed. If you were Czarina,
I like
what
that.
advice would you give us as we, amongst other communities up and down the West Coast, are struggling with this increased preponderance of substance abuse and addiction? Where do we start in terms of getting our arms around this issue?
The first things I would offer are that we need to embed addiction treatment services, peer mentors, and others like that inside of those organizations serving that population. We know, as you suggest, that many of these individuals are facing the disease. And we can make a great deal of effort by making it easy for people to access services and understand and not be afraid to get help that they need. So that would be one. I think in the schools as well, we have the resources right now to provide only one counselor in Benson High School. And at the same time, we believe that person has way more work and kids wanting help than she can help. And oftentimes they want help without their parents' knowledge. So insurance cannot be accessed to pay for it. So the more resources we can provide to helping kids in schools who are definitely seeking that help, I think is a good resource as well.
And when people come to you, they are not exclusively addicted to alcohol. Some also have other substance abuse
Absolutely.
issues. And what is your success in treating people who have other substance abuse issues other than alcohol?
I do not know that statistic in particular. Our overall completion rates exceed national averages. The national average is about 47%, and we usually hit around 55, 52% in terms of completion rates. But I can provide that information.
Has your demographic shifted at all in recent years, or has it remained relatively stable? How has it changed, if it has?
What we are finding is that individuals have much more severe mental health needs. And so it is no longer a usual or typical patient that only has an addiction issue. About 75% of our patients have a co-occurring mental health disorder. We are seeing an increase in the SPMI population.
I'm sorry, which population?
Yeah, I'm sorry, seriously and persistently mentally ill.
Okay, thank you.
And those individuals are seeking treatment, which has caused us to increase our programming for people who have an acute either mental health or physical health need, because those are the individuals that are going to hospital emergency departments for care. And we can provide a much more cost-effective way to help those individuals. And what's even cooler about that is those individuals who typically would just keep returning to the emergency department are graduating treatment currently at a higher rate than individuals who are not coming out of hospital emergency departments.
Thank you. Now I'm going to ask you the ultimate unfair question, but it was a question asked of me over breakfast this morning. And I gave my answer, but I'm curious to know what your answer to the question
Sure.
would be. The gentleman asked me why it seems that there is an increasing prevalence of mental health issues in our community. What is driving it? Do you have a sense?
I have several theories, but I couldn't say for sure, no.
Thank you.
I think,
Commissioner Fritz.
if I might comment
Please.
on that, I think
Yeah.
people are now talking about it, whereas before it was definitely something you didn't talk about and you didn't admit, you didn't ask for help.
Yes.
And then even if you did, you can't get it. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I did have a follow-up question, but it's completely gone out of my head. Oh, yes. You're still fundraising for this project?
We are. We are trying to identify an additional $1.4 million.
And if somebody is watching this television show and wanting to donate, how would they do that?
Please contact me, Marie Wacker, at DePaul Treatment Centers.
And what's the website?
It is DePaulTC.org.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hardesty.
I had a question about alcohol detoxification. I think over the years we've learned some lessons about what you do when someone is suffering from alcohol poisoning. Can you tell us what the current best practices are when you are trying to detox someone who is overexposed to alcohol?
Well, I would tell you that detoxing from alcohol can be, and it often is, life-threatening. We provide detoxification with medication so that the effects of the withdrawal from the substance are not as severe. The other thing would be that we can observe them, and, lots of times there's DTs, which are, yes, thank you. I have a hard time even saying it. So they have, so the best practice is really to get them into a medical treatment facility that can offer those really important transitional drugs.
Thank you for that, because I asked you that question very selfishly because I know Central City Concern has stopped their Hooper contract, and they did it very intentionally because they also have learned over 30 years that just putting somebody in a cell to detox them was not best practices that we've garnered over the last 30 years. And so I'm appreciative to understand that there has to be a medical component to detoxification, and it should not be just assuming that somebody will sleep it off, right? And then somehow be quote unquote normal when that's over.
That's correct.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that being on the record.
Very good. Thank you. This has been a good conversation. We appreciate the work you're doing. We'll hear from public testimony now.
We have
Groundbreaking.
3 people signed up.
Oh, wait, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No,
I
I'm
apologize.
Carly Harrison, and I work with Jill Sherman at Girding Eadlin, and we've been partnered with DePaul and Marie here for the last several years, helping them, and we're just really grateful to be here today and get to have groundbreaking soon. It always takes a village to pull these kinds of high community impact projects, notably on the financing side, but really all the partners involved. So thank you to Mayor Wheeler and the commission. So thank you.
So Carly, you're in charge of the development of the project, is that correct?
Yes, with Jill
bas-
Sherman.
Along with Jill, of course.
Correct.
And you represent an entire team. The schematics are stunning. And if you know the facility that DePaul is currently in, and you compare it, I mean, the facility is amazing in and of its own right, but when you compare it to the status quo, it's actually spectacular. And I want to thank you for working with this great team and really putting something forward that not only beats the adequacy test, it really is something to be proud of. It's really phenomenal. I think it's going to be a great vision for the future. It sets the bar very, very high. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That was our aim.
Very good. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, did we hear when groundbreaking is anticipated?
April 23rd.
April 23rd?
You should have an invitation. If not, it'll be there shortly.
I haven't had it yet, but I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks
Since
a
it's
lot.
in my hood.
Appreciate it. Now we'll hear from public. You cool your hills for a while, and we'll hear some public testimony. And I'm sorry, Carla, who do we have
They're
signed up?
Shedrick Wilkins,
Shedrick?
Lightning, and Maggie.
Very good. Come on up.
I'm Shedrick Wilkins. I like beer too much, and I consider I'm myself an expert on this topic. Number one is when I was homeless for a year in 2011 and 2012, when I went to City Team Ministries, if they breathalyze you, if you have alcohol, you're out on the street. And I really don't want to freeze in the cold weather and be drunk. Another thing too was at Bud Clark Commons as well. I spent 6 months there. If I drank, I'm out on the street. And plus, I would lose my spot at the Bud Clark Commons, okay? Number two is when I was studying at PSU University, I had to get drinking down to 1 day a week. I had to take 4 classes at the same time. Alcohol works 2 ways. It stops you from worrying about things, but I have to worry about a test, right, and study. It's okay, that's the thing, right? Also, people think that alcohol makes them more creative. I'm not too sure about that. I really think it's once a week is pretty good. And another thing is my son's 24, and I took him on the submarine at OMSI. He didn't ask one question. My son's 24, I'm 62. You can't drink on the submarine. So the Navy knows this. You don't want a bar fight in the submarine, but they did smoke a lot. They just smoked a lot on the submarine, but they never drank. And so the Navy knows this, that You don't want bar fights on a submarine, or you don't want a drunk crew or something having a party and they're attacked. So talk to the Navy. And the only thing good about beer, though, it has fluoride in it. If it's brewed in Wisconsin, but anyway, if you want to, and it's also an antiseptic. But anyway, yes, it has fluoride. All beer from Wisconsin is fluoridated, but Oregon's not. But another thing is, don't tell a dental hygienist that too. They don't want to hear how kids should drink beer so they won't have cavities. But anyway, another thing too, I respect the DePaul trucks. Now, I work for Target, and the DePaul trucks took food from our Target store to the food bank. So as I recall. So DePauls have trucks, and they provide that as transportation to the food bank, which is near the airport, the central processing area.
Thanks, Shutter. Appreciate it. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Karma. I think the project is very good, very positive. Girding and Edlund are a class act. Anything they're involved with, to my opinion, will be exceptional. And as you can see by the layout and everything you see on this, it is going in that direction. My biggest concern is what the speakers mentioned is on the increase in meth use and the potency. And again, I'm hoping that we're going to start making comments on where the most meth is coming from and understand that you need to talk about that to prevent that from happening and the potency that we're seeing. And as you know, in some of these centers, the main concern is on the violence in the centers and how you're going to deal with that. And as you know, at the emergency room hospitals, when people were seeking help and they had the police called on them, arrested, taken down to the jail, and then transported to the state mental hospital. To me, that was absolutely appalling. But what we're beginning to see is more type of community-type oriented centers, which I think falls back to the settlement agreement. And it is very positive. Again, on the supportive housing measure, will fit into that game also. Again, we need to still focus on more supportive housing being constructed, as Commissioner Hardesty stated. Are they going to go into supportive housing? Are they going to be able to stay in supportive housing and not just keep circling through different centers? So again, like I say on this project, very positive. I like what I see. I'll be watching it very close. And again, if that measure does pass, a lot of that money, I assume, can be directed toward these type of centers in the future and housing. And again, that measure is a $250 million ongoing sustainable money, which we've never seen before. Even on the affordable housing bond, that's not an ongoing sustainable income stream. So again, on the mental health side and the addiction services, we should see in the next 6 months to a year some amazing things happening, which is beneficial for the people and for their recovery and for them sustaining a life in which they can live in a housing unit supported and maintain that housing. And that's the key, is to maintain that housing, because these centers are less effective unless they can get into that housing and stay there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good morning.
Good morning, Maggie, Portland Homeless Town Hall. Different types of populations become addicted for different reasons. You've got athletes, you've got senior citizens who get hip and knee replacements, you have college students, you've got the mentally ill. There's plenty of mentally ill people who are not addicted to drugs, who don't take drugs. There's a variety of reasons, but in all the reasons of addiction, we call these centers, these drug treatment centers in St. Vincent de Paul, you know what we call their motto? We're here for you until the money runs out. And they cycle them on and off the street. Okay, so that's what we refer to St. Vincent de Paul treatment centers. So the insurance runs out, they end up back on the street. they go back to doing drugs. They go back in, they get treated, the insurance runs out, they go back on the street. So this is going to be no different. They're just building another treatment center and doing things the same old way they did it before. So as Lightning says, if you do not have the permanent supportive housing component, then, you know, you're not doing anything different, okay? So as far as permanent supportive housing, it's like you can look at the different populations and ask yourself or the medical community, what kind of supportive housing do they need? Obviously, you know, somebody who is severely schizophrenic needs a certain type of supportive housing. Somebody who's, you know, maybe bipolar needs a certain type. You know, you've got to tailor the services to what is going to help them function. And the way to do that is to ask them. And, you know, I meet people out on the streets who are schizophrenic or bipolar who have left SRO housing because it was so horrible. You cannot provide housing that is so horrible, like shelters and SROs. These people will leave and they will go back out and sleep on the street. Okay, I meet schizophrenics on the max who spend their money in hotels, and when their money runs out, they go take the max out to the end of the line and sleep on the street because they cannot be in a shelter. They're too, you know, it's too stressful. So, you know, the anxiety is at the bottom of this, you know, for them not, you know, as this gentleman said, you know, to staying clean and functional.
Yeah, Maggie, if I could reflect on that, because you make some really good points here. And first of all, I think we have to acknowledge that DePaul Treatment Center is one part of the continuum of care. And you're challenging us to go beyond just the treatment piece and talk about where do people go after they're done with the treatment piece?
To
Where's the
stay
housing? Where's the
functional.
supportive housing?
Right.
How do we ensure that they don't just come back onto the streets or fall back into a cycle of addiction? And if there's one thing that gives me hope about our ability to address the homeless crisis, particularly as it relates to the most chronically homeless, those who've been homeless the longest, those who have coexisting conditions, whether it's addiction or mental health or disabilities or whatever, it is the system-wide commitment we're starting to see around answering your question, what's next? What happens once somebody comes in? Where do they go next? How do we ensure that 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, they're successful where they are? And I don't see that so much being the responsibility of the DePauls of the world. I see that being more our responsibility with the county and our other service provider partners to put the system together.
Exactly.
And to be honest, the system has been hellishly fragmented for a long, long
Broken.
time. But
Yeah.
I'm starting to see the right leadership in the right place, the right partnerships, the right collaborations, and an understanding that this is a system. And if there's any piece of the system that's not holding up its weight, the rest of the system collapses under that weight. And so what you expressed is something I'm spending a lot of time thinking about. And I really appreciate your raising it.
Okay, I appreciate that you're thinking about these things and, you know,
I'm
because.
obsessing about it more to the point.
Okay, you know,
Yeah.
because it's a dog pile, and I'm looking at the comments of all the people who are running, and I'm just going, you flunk, you flunk, you flunk, you flunk. You didn't get it, you know? You're not getting it, you know? It's got to be these components. Okay,
Thank you for your perspective. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Very good. So unless there's anything else, this is an emergency ordinance. Carla, please call the roll.
Fritz?
Well, picking up on what Maggie just said, Mayor Wheeler, you get it. And you've been working really hard on this for 3 years and have looked at the whole system in partnership with Commissioner Sharon Myron at Montgomery County,
many
new
others.
leadership there. I, in the first time in 12 years, am hopeful that we are starting to get more of a system with fewer gaps. Still, obviously, it's not, because we live in the United States where we don't have a system with no gaps and we don't get federal funding. But this is a huge part of the problems, of the solution. Thank you very much to DePaul for your leadership in this. I'm delighted that it's going in East Portland. East Portland deserves nice places and nice facilities and nice services, and good jobs. And so I hope that as you move forward to opening this center, expanding your staff, that you will be looking to local hiring, that Girding Edelin will be looking at using local sources and not just Staples, as we found. There's some real great local businesses in East Portland who could contribute to services to get this facility constructed. It's really ideal. My parents-in-law live at Cherrywood Village, which is just a little bit further down Cherry Blossom Drive. And so the location where you are, right next to Portland Adventist Hospital, where in beginning of January I got really great care, and I would recommend it to anyone. That's close by. The East Portland Community Center is close by. I hope that your clients will be encouraged to go avail themselves of the community center services. Alcohol treatment is not, it's not covered by insurance in the same way, particularly when it's coexisting with mental health care. And it's been traditional, ever since I've been working in healthcare in Oregon since 1986, it's been a challenge to find that insurance and the way to do it forward. And that's why DePaul is just such a vital part of this whole system. I know that Commissioner Fish is happy listening to this from the other side, knowing that this is a route to permanent supportive housing and that the permanent supportive housing is going to be there as well. So as was commented, it's really all coming together. So thank you, Mayor Wheeler. This was not at all easy to make this all come together. And you and your staff have really been very creative and also very fiscally responsible, working with Director Callahan, the Portland Housing Bureau staff, the state of Oregon, thanks to Mabel Clark McDonald Fund for making this project a reality as well. And as was mentioned, there's still a $1 million gap. So be sure to look into this program because it's for everybody. It's not only for people who are homeless, it's for everybody. And so it's going to be a really fabulous facility that I think is going to be very much needed and very well run. Aye.
Hardesty.
I also want to add my appreciation to Mayor Wheeler. When I first got here, we were having conversations about this vision for DePaul Treatment Center in East Portland, in my neck of the woods. And after seeing the renderings, I'm just in awe. Everybody deserves a beautiful place, everybody. And so I am grateful, that there will be a community meeting hub, because that's one of the things we truly lack in East Portland is a place for community members that is beautiful, that's not in a church basement, no disrespect to church basements, but something that actually can bring the sun in. This is a vital part of what we need to do to make sure that we're protecting our most vulnerable people. And I also want to be clear, 70 beds is not going to solve our problem of lack of mental health beds in the city of Portland. It's not even close to actually solving the problem, but it's one piece of the solution. And my hat is off to DePaul Treatment Center for understanding that East Portland needed a facility like this. And as Commissioner Fritz said, it's just ideally located. It's just a win-win-win for the community. I also want to give a shout out to the financier, which I always call magic workers, because as someone who serves on the board of a nonprofit that provides very low-income housing for families, I know what it takes to put these projects together. And most of the time, there's a lot of prayer involved and a lot of sleepless nights and just not knowing until the bitter end whether or not all the dots are going to come together. So I applaud the creativity that goes into moving this project forward. Look forward to being at the groundbreaking. I am very happy to vote aye.
Udaley.
Well, I want to express my appreciation for the critical work that DePaul Treatment Center does. And since we're making plugs and soapboxing this morning, I guess I'll just put in my plug for supporting and encouraging our regional partners and our state to meaningfully invest in homeless and housing services. One of the reasons we're seeing an increase in people with mental health issues and homelessness is that Portland and Multnomah County is the de facto service provider for the region. And we really need our neighbors to be able to serve their own community members so people can stay in their communities where they have the best chance of recovering and getting back on their feet, and so that we can begin to turn the tide on this really urgent matter. I've lost 3 family members to alcohol addiction and abuse. I feel incredibly fortunate to not face that challenge myself, but I know how vital it is, and I'm happy to support this. I vote aye.
Wheeler?
Well, this is a big step forward. I remember when, just a few short years ago, we were pondering whether or not DePaul Treatment Center would actually continue to exist in our community. And the thought of losing all of these treatment beds at a time when the demand is growing seemed unfathomable. And I really appreciate, Marie, the work you've put into this, the work your board has put into this, and the other advocates who have been relentless in trying to move this vision forward. It's been great. And like lightning, I'm really pleased that Girding Edelin is engaged in this project because they do exceptional work in the community. And frankly, you know, they're noted globally now. We want them to do more work right here in Portland, Oregon. So I'm glad to see them engaged in this way. And the Housing Bureau, I want to thank everybody for their hard work as well. The city was often pushing on this model because it was very important to us that if we were going to put public dollars into this model, then there had to be a benefit to lower income people to gain access to these same services. And so just to reiterate, the money that the city of Portland is putting into this project goes to the 10 beds that will be regulated at 60% MFI for a period of 60 years. And so, you know, our contribution is actually a relatively small portion of the overall contribution to this project, but I think it's a very important contribution because it opens up access for people who might not otherwise have access to these treatment opportunities. This is a great vision. I'm glad that the city of Portland was able to play a role. It's no surprise to anybody that this one is very personal to me. My father spent many years affiliated with the DePaul Treatment Centers. He'd be very proud of this vision. I vote aye. Thank you. The ordinance is approved. Good luck. As we like to say at this phase, congratulations, your ordinance is passed, don't screw it up.
I've never heard that before.
Commissioner Fritz used to say that all the time.
No.
I was like, can we say that?
Thank you. Carla, next item is time certain 178. If you could read that, please. 1015. Yeah, we're good.
Appeal of the Portland Japanese Garden against the hearing officer's decision of approval with conditions limiting the garden's office use in the house at 369 Southwest Kingston Avenue to 4 years, LU 19192268CU.
Colleagues, we return to vote on the revised findings and decision for the Portland Japanese Garden. These updated findings reflect our tentative decision to uphold the appeal. Is there any further discussion? Thank you. Do I have a motion to uphold the appeal, revise the hearings officer's decision to approve the conditional use review, and allow for the requested 10 years and adopt the findings?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Fritz moves. Commissioner Udaley seconds. Carla, can you please call the roll for a final vote?
Fritz.
I very much appreciate the City Attorney's Office for their careful writing of the findings, in particular the conclusion that although the opponents argued that the approval criteria were not met because of the use of a Kingston house of an office created livability, impacts in violation of the approval criteria. The City Council does not find the arguments or evidence in that regard persuasive. And it's really important to remember that in quasi-judicial proceedings where we are acting as judges of have the rules been followed, have the rules not been followed, it's only the approval criteria which can make a difference in our decision. So the approval criteria can be met with the conditions that are now in the report, and I am happy to support this. Aye.
Hardesty.
I believe the hearings officer was very clear. There were very specific rules that were supposed to be abided by. The party actually didn't do anything to actually change the outcome of them not moving in that time period. And I cannot in good conscience reward people who didn't play by the rules. There was a reason why they were given a 10-year limit. And because they did absolutely nothing to actually change the outcome, I will be still a no vote. I vote no.
Udaley?
Well, the Portland Japanese Gardens is one of the gems of our city. It was not determined that the use of this house contributes in any way to the various livability issues brought forward by the neighborhood. I would support this item if we were making it permanent, and I'm happy to vote aye.
Wheeler?
So just to remind people, my preference was to go with the compromise brought forward by city staff. There were not sufficient votes to uphold that compromise. I hope that the Japanese Garden works with community members to help ensure that no future council needs to take this item up again. I vote aye. The motion carries. Next item, 179, please.
Approve revisions to the Human Resources Administrative Rules related to workplace harassment, discrimination, and retaliation, recruitment, employment of retirees, inclement weather, compensation, performance management, and prohibited conduct.
Colleagues, this ordinance amends and clarifies the city's human resources administrative rules to reflect changes in both state and federal law, and to make some other housekeeping changes to clarify policies and rules for our city's employees. The human resources administrative rules ensure that the city is upholding the highest ethical standards, acting as an employer of choice, and serving in the best interests of our community. This is an emergency item, and it is so to avoid continued conflict with State of Oregon legislative changes that came into effect on January 1st of this year. Revisions to the administrative rules will be retroactive, therefore, to January 1st. I've been informed that there is a need to introduce an amendment. I'm proposing an amendment, therefore, to the ordinance to remove from consideration changes to HRAR 2.02 due to ongoing bargaining which is taking place with our labor unions. If the amendment is adopted, then we can direct the Bureau of Human Resources to come back to council when they are ready to request the changes to HRAR 2.02. And Director of HR Kathy Bless is here, and she'll tee up this amendment and answer any further questions that people may have.
Absolutely, and good morning, Mayor and
Morning.
Commissioners. Again, Kathy Bless, Director of HR. We had some ongoing conversations with our union partners related to the definitions of HRAR 2.02, which is really outside of the legislative changes that are mandated. And so in really an abundance of caution and to be collaborative with our union partners, we want to just pull the HRAR 2.02, and then, of course, we will bring it back when it's ready to be adopted. So I would very much like support in amending the ordinance that eliminates 2.02.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Hardesty. We have a second from Commissioner Fritz. Any further discussion on the amendment? Please call the roll.
Fritz?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye, the amendment's on the table.
Great. As a background, over the last year, BHR has received feedback from employees on the HR administrative rules. In November, BHR sent out a solicitation to email to all employees and labor unions for feedback on the rules. We also created an HRAR rules revision page so that employees had a central place to look for all of the documentation. We received over 100 comments from employees and labor unions. We distributed a second draft in December of 2019, did a notice and comment period that started on December 11th and went through January 6th. We had several informational meetings to discuss proposed changes with employees. The proposed revisions then were finalized February, and the result is this ordinance. And then as a follow-up to this process, comprehensive training on the new rules will occur this spring for managers and supervisors. The changes and clarifications really are as follows. Under Rule 3.01, recruitment process, it expands equitable recruitment processes to include competitive recruitment and limited competitive recruitments. This expansion applies to at-will positions and already includes regular, temporary, casual, and limited duration employees. Amendment to the Rule 3.06, employment of retirees is required due to changes in the state of Oregon around PERS. Revisions are necessary to Rule 4.01, drug and alcohol use prohibitions, to clarify the definition of drugs to not include CBD products, which are federally legal. To minimize upfront budget impacts with inclement weather incidents, Rule 4.11 modifies how these incidents are paid. The rule provides eligible employees deferred holiday hours equal to the number of hours the employee was regularly scheduled to work on the day of the event instead of a regular pay for time not worked. Rule 8.02, hours of work and overtime compensation for FLSA covered employees. This clarifies that due to the unique nature of these operations, emergency communication supervisors employed at BOAC and serving on a 24-hour shift shall be eligible for overtime based on all hours paid over 40 in a work week, excluding paid sick leave. Work schedule changes are also expanded in Rule 8.02, not to include that overtime compensation under this section is not applicable to the short-term schedule modifications, such as work schedule changes made in response to an inclement weather event unless otherwise required by law. Modifications to Rule 8.03, hours of work, are necessary to address other exceptions in rare circumstances. The provisions in Rule 8.04, compensation, eliminates verbiage no longer applicable to the Bureau Director contracts. Revision Rule to 9.02, performance management, establishes clear priorities, support frequent and meaningful feedback, and ensures equitable assessments and individual performance. This revision aligns with the process and goals of the city's performance management system, Success Factors. And finally, amendments necessary to Rule 11.02, prohibited conduct are generally required to clarify and expand on examples of prohibited conduct for city employees. This expansion was approved in 2019 under Resolution 37413 to replace Rule 4.05, outside employment and volunteer activities. So that is just a cleanup. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, and now request council to authorize BHR to make and implement the proposed changes as I have described.
Thanks, Director Bless. Commissioner Hardesty has a question.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Director. My question has to do with the overtime rule as it relates to employees who work a 24-hour shift.
So that provision was added for the emergency communications supervisors. It was at the request of the BOEC leadership to provide overtime on paid leave, excluding sick time, because their supervisors are regularly forced to work beyond their normal schedules due to their 24/7 operations. Currently, if a supervisor takes vacation earlier in the week and then is forced to cover 4 hours for a peer who calls in sick, they don't get any sort of premium. This makes the leap from a 911 operator to a supervisor even less appealing than it already is for dispatchers.
I appreciate that. And dispatching, I was more thinking fire, which always works a 24-hour shift. And so I just want to make sure that we're not exacerbating inequities in our systems when we talk about putting a rule in place that impacts all employees. Just want to make sure that we've considered what happens to employees who work 24 hours. I want to make sure that they're not unduly impacted by this rule change. Most of the time, it ends up costing me a lot more money than I anticipated, so I just want to be really clear of what this really means for us. Can you?
Absolutely. So the rule itself is unique to the emergency communications supervisor classification. It would not expand beyond outside of 911.
But I would suspect that others, as we do negotiations, will be looking for expansion of that rule. So I just want to make sure that
We would not forward that interest, absolutely.
I see that we have legal counsel who is very willing and able to assist us in this effort.
Absolutely.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. Commissioner Hardesty, this rule previously
Would you
had...
identify yourself? for
Oh,
the
sorry,
record? I'm
Heidi
sorry.
Brown from the City Attorney's Office. My apologies. This rule previously had included certain supervisors under certain circumstances where they would get overtime, and it didn't cause a big issue at that time. That got changed, and in hopes of being more uniform with the application of it. And then I think in this instance, the realization by BOAC was that was creating this,
An unfair.
well, the compensation wasn't enough to entice people to want to move up to the supervisory level. But it was previously in place, so I would be hopeful that it won't have the consequences that you're worrying about.
Thank you. I'm just always concerned that we don't normally, when we're thinking about making minor changes, we don't sometimes think about what the impact are on our 24-hour shift workers. So thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Daly.
Thank you. I have a few questions. So employees are expected to report instances of harassment, discrimination, and retaliation regardless of its origin. So would that include harassment, discrimination, and retaliation from members of the public?
So that is the rule that was pulled.
Oh, okay.
2.02, and so,
Still working.
yeah, still working on all of those pieces.
Okay, sorry, I missed that detail. The reason I ask is because I'm hearing from many city employees that they are experiencing an increase in harassment, in particular, internally and from members of the public, and that members of the public are finding creative ways to harass and bother employees that are women, but the conduct couldn't necessarily be construed as sexual harassment because, for instance, they're making an animal noise at only women that work with the public in a space open to the public. How are we going to address things like that?
Oh, sure. So the Human Resource Administrative rules are conduct rules for employees and how we treat each other. The how the public treats a city employee is really outside of the scope of what the HRARs are intended to provide. I do think it's an incredibly important issue, and I'll let Heidi speak a little bit on kind of the public interaction.
I also think it's an important issue, and I guess I need to know where those rules and regulations live. Is that more of a state level issue? And
Yeah, Commissioner Hardesty, excuse me, Commissioner Udaly, sorry.
It happens all
Just
the
talking to
time.
you and got that in my brain. We do want to ensure that our employees have a safe and protected workplace. And we have had instances with other commissioner offices that we've worked with to help when they've had folks who have been subjected to discriminatory treatment. What you described, whether it's sexual harassment or it's harassment based on gender, all those things are prohibited under state law. We would want to at least work with all of our employees in an effort to protect them from discriminatory and harassing treatment, whether it's from colleagues, which the administrative rule covers, or from citizens. So if you're hearing of instances like that, certainly if we could have the employee or the manager or somebody let BHR know, and then they would work with our office to try to be creative in figuring out ways to help protect that employee.
Okay. My next question is about the language about off-duty conduct that creates a disrespectful work environment based on.
That's been, yeah, we are still working on that. That's part of the language that the union and our office is working on, and
Oh, okay.
Commissioner Fritz's office had raised with us as well.
Well, I just want to also raise my concerns about that because we have at least a couple well-publicized instances of that kind of behavior without seeming to be able to do anything about it. So I'd like to know more about that. And then my final question is, could you briefly describe how the upcoming changes to HR 2.02 are stronger than the current rules?
The main gist of the changes that we were making were because there's a new law, the Workplace Fairness Act, that is going into effect in October. Well, there's one part that went into effect last October, but that just has to do with the statute of limitations and expanding it. But the bulk of it, which has to do with how we need to interact with employees when we receive a complaint that falls under 2.02, the bulk of that takes effect this coming October. So the rule was looked at to address that. And then while we were in there, I think there was an interest between BHR and our office in trying to clarify issues, not so much to change it, because I think it still comports with what we understood was the interest in as far as protecting employees from discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. So the intent wasn't to actually change the rule, but rather to better explain it and have people really have something within the rule, in addition to our 2.02 training that we provide, that would help people understand what conduct we really are looking at.
Okay, I just would like to be kept informed moving forward, because I am really concerned about this issue of employees being harassed by members of the public, and if they're getting creative about the harassment, then we need to get creative about our response.
And Commissioner, I would be happy to talk to you with Director Bless about this and learn who's being subjected to it, and then talk to their managers about ways that we can help protect people from that, because that really, we don't want that to happen. Some of it we can't control, but to the extent that we can provide support and protections for them, absolutely, we really want to do that, because we don't want people subjected to that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. We'll now hear public testimony on this item. Carla, any public testimony?
Yes, we have 3 people signed up.
Excellent.
Lightning, Maggie, and Shedrick.
Come on up. Should we dice up the order this time? Maggie, you want to start first this time?
Sure.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, so years and years and years ago, many years ago, back in college, I actually used to be a phone operator, and I had the wonderful opportunity to break protocol, and we had one of our accounts was one of those guys who flies the helicopters, or the company that flies the helicopters to put out forest fires. And so normally we're supposed to page them, but it was the middle of the night and this guy called me, and it was obvious that life and limb were in danger. So I called this guy at home and woke him up. And I was not supposed to do that, but I did. And because I called him at home, this guy who called me did not lose his house because the flames were licking at his house. And if I did not call the helicopter guy at home, he would have stayed in bed for God knows how many minutes. So it's very important what 911 does. They save life and limb. So I would say, if anybody, regardless of an employee or a family member or public, is harassing someone and getting away in the job of somebody whose, job it is to save people, I would say that's taken very seriously. But if they're off duty and it's something personal that has nothing to do with their job, wouldn't they just go through the normal protocol of, whatever authority you would contact, depending, is it bullying? Is it, online bullying? Wouldn't they just, contact the police like anybody else? I mean, we don't have a monarchy. It's not like a king. You're not working for the king, so.
I'm happy to answer that for you, Maggie. We do have a code of conduct that we expect from city employees, right? That every city employee receives when they're hired. And there's no exceptions to the code of conduct, whether you're elected or whether you are hired at a front desk.
Oh, okay, so this is if the city employee is responsible for the offending behavior. Okay.
This is all about city.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I would say to any city employee, definitely you want to, hold yourself up and to the highest level because you're a role model for everyone, for the public. So think about that every day. You're a role model for the public. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. Good morning.
Morning, I'm Shedrick. I believe this about, let's say there's a rally at the mayor's house. And somebody asks the city employee, where's the mayor's house? And that person says, well, go look it up by yourself. They're stuck in a no-win situation. If it's embarrassing to you, why did you tell this person where my house is at? At the same time, if they don't tell them where the house is at, they were rude to have them look it up themselves. So I do believe that employee has a right to know or have it annotated, this had something to do with a mass rally at your house. And if it's ruled by you that they should be demoted or fired, that needs to come up. That they were really under a really bad situation here, where you're saying, in hindsight, I was embarrassed by the press, but the employee was in a no-win situation. Because either they're rude to the person, look up the mayor's house yourself, and I think Mayor Hales was the first person to be involved with this kind of thing, and then you got involved too. As people are finding out where your house is at, it gets on the news, and then they're stuck. Either they're rude to the person who's asked the question, if they say, find it yourself.
Yeah, and just to be crystal clear, your point's well taken, but my house is, number one, readily available online, and I have not been aware of any employees asking about that issue, nor have I retaliated against any employees who've shared where my house is. But thing number two, just so people know, I don't live at my house anymore. And that's also been made very clear in the public.
If you evaluate me as an employee, I have the right to annotate that question was asked to me that day.
Yeah, understood. Thanks, Shedrick. Appreciate it. Thank you. Good morning.
Yes, my name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Karma. One of the things I saw on the 2.02 against workplace harassment is jokes. Somebody saying a joke. I'm offended by that joke you just said. Now, when we look at that, it's interesting when you're looking at Mayor Bloomberg and what Elizabeth Warren said about him. Now, if he was working here, would he be fired? I think he would be. if he was supplying money to this city through grants, would we stop the grants immediately and say, due to these comments that Elizabeth Warren stated, we're not taking your money anymore? You either make a stand or you don't. What is that money worth to you? What does it mean to you if somebody's making those comments and they're found to be making those comments, and then they're signing non-disclosure agreements that they made those comments, and then you receive money from them? And of course, I know the city of Portland would receive no money from the Bloomberg organization on any type of grants, and you deny it immediately and give it back. And I agree with you 100% on doing that. Now, on the overtime issues, I think there has to be a cap put in place on just how much overtime you can do. And I don't know if that's really kind of controlled by the unions on that, and it's, I really want to see that just set in position. There has to be a cap. That's all. Just put a cap, and we're all good on that. The issue on the weather conditions. Well, we're in a situation right now. Let's take it one step further. Let's talk about COVID-19. Are we going to have discussions on that as far as on the employees? As you can see, the room appears to be even more empty today, which I think there could be a reason for that. That's just my opinion. But now if the employees say, I'm scared. Everything I'm seeing right now, I want to stay home. I want to continue my pay. I think they should receive their pay. Now, that's my opinion. That's a far reach, but it isn't too much of a far reach when you look what's going on in China, you look what's going on in other countries, and then you look what's going on beginning here. So we're going to cross an area here which I think really needs to come up for discussion. What are we going to do on this COVID-19 pertaining to the employees, the city employees? If they're called to come into work and they feel that their safety is in jeopardy, how are they going to be treated? Will they be retaliated against? There needs to be a plan taken into consideration at this time on COVID-19. And that is my main concern right now, more than anything that I can ever deal with in this city right now. And I study everything, and I go over the mapping and everything on this, and the pathogen mapping and everything, and every scientist and what they say. And let me tell you something. The city needs to set something up now, and I'm asking that to be set up immediately. Thank you.
Commissioner Hardesty, and then I have a comment.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Fritz, then Commissioner
Still
Hardesty.
looking left
Finance.
now.
Interesting, in the age of Trump, there's tons of retaliation from Trump's administration. So
Maggie,
yeah,
hang on
comment
for a
all you
sec.
want on that.
Maggie, hang on.
So
Commissioner
we
Fritz.
actually, Lightning, we already have administrative rules that allow people to do teleworking, and there is a process that they get approval from their manager and that they can work from home if they get that.
Because
Plus,
of COVID-19.
no.
Put
we've-
that on the record.
We have had it, no, we have had it
Put
for.
it on the record.
We have had it for years.
Put it on the record. COVID-19. Say it on the record.
No.
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Also, we passed statewide paid sick time. So everybody in Oregon who works for an employer of 5 or more gets to stay home when they're sick, and we encourage people to do that.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. As a emergency room nurse by training and someone who's been in the healthcare field forever, I just want to reiterate that the last thing we want to do is make people lose their mind about a potential virus that may or may not impact folks. Let me be clear.
Wait, Lightning, don't go, because I
Lightning.
want to say something on it.
Lightning, just
Give
be-
us 2 more minutes. There's
Yeah,
something else
if-
I want to say.
If you, no, we're not excluding you. No.
On in.
We actually, today has been a fabulous day with you,
It's
Lightning.
upside down day. We're inviting you
know,
back.
right?
Sit down.
See what happens when all our communications people leave, right? It's like all of a sudden we have time. But seriously, I have absolute confidence in Multnomah County Health Department. And just so you know, the Bureau of Emergency Management, which I am in charge of, are doing daily phone calls. We're providing daily information throughout our entire first responder system. There is no need for people to lose their minds at this time. We already have systems in place that, if necessary, we will be able to deploy, right? So again, the best advice is wash your hands And if you feel sick, stay home and use your sick leave or your vacation or whatever you got, right? Let's not feed into the hysteria around people who are immigrants and refugees. I've heard that people aren't drinking. 35% of the population is no longer drinking Corona beer because they believe that's where you get the virus.
Oh, boy.
We have an obligation.
Virus ever, and this is comical right now. I disagree with the statements, even tying it to Corona.
I've made
beer,
nothing-
and people need to take this serious. Study China, study the other countries,
All right.
follow the path that
Thank you,
and
Lightning.
get your facts
Okay, now
straight.
we're gonna kick you
Now,
out.
I'm gonna
Bye-bye.
be excluded
It's
for
been a good day.
defending the people of this city. Thank you very much.
You know, it's hard to compliment Lightning when he doesn't quiet down so that you can share that we all have a concern, but we also have to be responsible with our concern. And we have to make sure that people who are the most vulnerable have what they need to get through this crisis. I have every confidence in our health department and our first responders that we are ready and able to respond when it's necessary.
So the only comment I wanted to make to Lightning, and unfortunately, he left.
He'll watch it on
There are, we have Director Bless here from HR. There are already contingency plans under development for the city employees, and communications are going out to city employees. That's all I wanted to contribute to that particular conversation. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Fritz.
Well, Interim Director Kathy Bless is doing an absolutely fantastic job, and not some interim directors are kind of hesitant to do things while they're in that role, and you have absolutely grasped the urgency of many of these issues. And so there's a lot of changes in these administrative rules. My staff and I have gone through them, and we very much appreciate them. We thank you for working with us in the City Attorney's Office for taking another look at the 2.02. I can't ever say 2.02 without thinking of Commissioner Fish. And, you know, just 12 years ago, you know, we didn't think we needed rules on how people behave in the workplace. And then lo and behold, we did, because if you don't have the rule, then you can't say, actually, that's not okay. And so thank you for allowing more discussion of it. Obviously, as Commissioner Udaly has put some of her concerns on the record, it is one of the most important that we all care about. And so look forward to that coming back in fairly short order. But in the meantime, happy to support these changes. Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Udaly.
Well, I think I've already made it clear that I am concerned about city employees being harassed for doing their jobs. So I do look forward to how we can address that in the upcoming changes to HR 202. In the meantime, I'm pleased to support this. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. Thank you for your hard work on that. To the regular agenda, 184, please.
Amend the sewer and drainage facilities design manual and delegate authority to make future revisions to the Director of the Bureau of Environmental Services.
Colleagues, the Bureau of Environmental Services oversees the design of sewer and drainage facilities. The Sewer and Drainage Facilities Design Manual was adopted by the City Council back in 2007. It's an administrative document used by BES, private developers, and a number of other city bureaus that construct public works improvements in the public right-of-way. This ordinance asks us, the council, to adopt a revised manual, which includes changes to be more seismically resilient and to be up to date on accepted civil engineering design practices. This ordinance also authorizes the BES director to amend the manual as needed in the future to keep up with similar changes. Here today to give us a brief presentation are Bill Ryan, who's our chief engineer, Colleen Harold, who's our equity manager, and Ben Fitch, who's the quality analyst. They all do hard work with the Bureau of Environmental Services, and we're glad to have you here. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor.
Morning.
Commissioners. Thank you very much for that introduction. I want to give a little further introduction to Colleen and Ben. Colleen was a design engineer for several years and she is responsible for several of the larger sewer rehab projects that have been constructed throughout the city during that time.
Great. And Bill, I hate to be a stickler, but for the record, could you just add your name and your title?
My
for the
name is
record?
Bill Ryan,
Thank you.
Chief Engineer for BES.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. And as I said, Colleen's been a designer, and she took on the additional responsibility or different responsibility of taking charge of the quality of all of our standards and specifications, which you can imagine is a real exciting position. So it's, we are very grateful to Colleen for all the great work that she's done, and for Ben Fitch, who has also done yeoman's work to assist in bringing together the sewer and drainage facilities design manual.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. My name is Colleen Harold. Ben, go ahead.
And I'm Ben Fitch. I'm an analyst at the Bureau of Environmental Services.
Thank you both.
Just a correction, I am now the quality manager, not the equity manager.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
We're going to do a presentation, Ben and I. It takes 5 minutes, and we'll go back and forth and just tell you what we've done. Again, we're here to support the ordinance and ask you to approve the current revision, updated revision of the manual, as well as then give the director authority to amend the manual as needed in the future. So here we go. Go to the next slide and you start.
Okay, so the project objective is pretty straightforward. It's to update the sewer design manual. The last update that had occurred was in 2008 with a couple side erratas that were not formally, that were not put into the manual itself. So simply put, we needed to update the manual and reference what we're actually doing in practice, and standards have changed. So it was just to bring that forward and make it actually line up with what we're doing today.
We have taken the manual, we've updated language, figures, policies, codes, and title callouts and references. We've looked at all the equations. We've made sure they're correct and reflected that. We've updated and pretty much rewritten chapters 5, 6, and 7 that relate back to the zoning codes that are coming in November to you. We've had expanded the sections of choices of materials, which in the past, designers have had to ask permission to use. Now they're in the manual, which creates efficiency. You don't have to ask to use them. They're there for you to use. And it increases the tools in their toolbox, which we wanted to do. And
we had gender language in our
we did.
manual?
Yes, all the manholes are now maintenance holes. We no longer call
the
them
manholes are now
maintenance holes.
maintenance.
Yeah, I really,
No,
It's
I am not. I'm laughing because it just never occurred to me that our
Yes.
manuals would be gender anything, right? That would even come up. But as soon as you said manhole cover, I was like, yeah, of course, right?
Yeah, I wish there were women holes now, but they're manholes. They're maintenance holes, so
I
there you go.
don't wish that. Okay,
Let's
anyhow.
proceed.
Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, let's proceed. So we've increased some sections. We've added a resiliency and seismic considerations section because, again, our city is proactive that way, and we wanted to create just a paragraph or two to really challenge people to start merging this into their designs, in particular with sewers. We also have added the use of trenchless technologies into a section because we are state-of-the-art, the city of Portland, in trenchless technologies. We do cured in place. We do microtunneling and horizontal directional drilling. And other cities call us because we are the experts in those construction methods. And we want that to be in the manual and for them to continue to call us. So those sections are updated as well.
With this next slide, you'll briefly see our schedule and timeline. This schedule has included 2 inside internal reviews of the manual at the 50 and 90, and it's also included a public review that had 2 public information sessions, and we have received and responded to consultant, contractor, and manufacturer comments to address their concerns and make the manual better with their help. Another note is if you approve today, we will still be doing our normal public reviews. So this isn't going to go strictly internal. We will still go to the public and make sure that our consultants are are aware of what's going on with their manual changes and that they have an active voice in what's going on.
Do you have a technical advisory committee? I know we have the Portland Utility Board, but they're not necessarily the technical experts. Do you have a group that you rely on for things like this?
So we have, Colleen went before NUCA and talked to NUCA, which
What's
is...
NUCA?
Northwest Utility Contractors Association.
Oh, uh-huh.
We also took it to DRAC, but we do have,
Development
BES
Review
has...
Advisory Committee.
We also have a BES standards and practices. So if we hit a problem of any kind or an issue where we didn't know how to advance, we brought it to our in-house standards and practices made up of upper management and lower management to help us find the path to solve the issue if there was one.
But I'm glad to hear that we do have public input as well.
We do have public input, and we received some very good feedback from, there was an outside technical expert who represented a concrete association, and they gave us very good comments and actually helped some of our equations out. So we have received also internal and external technical experts, yeah.
And is it specified as to what the public engagement will be for future manual revisions?
The manual speaks to any edits, comments, update, corrections. You can fill out a form and give it to Ben and I online, and we'll address it immediately. And that's all.
When you're going to make a change, is there a specified, like you just showed the timeline of public meeting, comment period, is that going to be still in effect?
That will remain the same, even though internally we'll no longer, if you accept this proposal, we'll no longer have to come to you for changes.
Right.
We're going to still keep the same process, so there will still be a public review and comment period.
And that's required in what we're approving? Yeah. Great.
And I would like to say that no major issues, we worked with other bureaus, they're included in our public outreach, and there were no major issues. In fact, we worked together on inlet ownership and maintenance, so I wanted you to know that.
Thank you. If I might, I don't think that it's great to know that this sewer and drainage facility design manual will continue to be updated. I guess the question is, under what circumstance would you come back to the city council seeking our input before you what would be the process for you to seek out input for making additional changes if it was like different than the norm and it's different than just language change? What would the scenario have to be in order for you to want to come back in front of us for authorization and approval for changes?
Commissioner, I can't imagine what the circumstance would be, but I know that we'll be working with our commissioner directly in future changes, and hopefully they'll be able to identify this is something that probably goes beyond this. So right offhand, I can't think of a circumstance that would create that.
I would suspect if you're about to make a change that requires us to invest tens of millions of dollars into it, that you'd probably want to talk to us before you made a change like that, right?
Oh, certainly.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Please continue.
Okay, just lastly, we want this manual to be a live document, so we're going to have a live link. Of course, there will be hard copies located at the Portland Building and at the BDS Permit Center for your pickup and purchase if you want something offline. Ben and I will continue to be the contacts for any changes or updates. And then I just want to thank Ben as an equal facilitator during this manual update process. And it really made this update come to fruition, and I just want to thank him for his work. Thank you.
Any additional questions, Commissioner Fritz?
Thank you, President Hardesty. Madam President, I regret that we're probably not going to be saying that at the national level for the next 4 years, but I'll say it at the local level. We can do it here. I just have a question about this stormwater management manual. That's different from this, is that right?
It is.
Yes.
But along that line, we worked very closely with the Stormwater Management Manual team because we want these to look like a set and that they come together. A lot of the two manuals had great overlap, and we worked on separating that when we did this manual, which was part of why this ended up on my desk, is that overlap became confusing. So we work with that team extensively to make sure that we were in agreement and that the duplication was removed when possible.
And the stormwater management manual, if changes to that, would come back to council, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would just say as an editorial comment that I feel absolutely no expertise in sewer design. So I'm happy to change this to be an administrative process. I think when it comes to stormwater management, it's something that average people are interested in because we might be digging the ditches ourselves. So I'm glad to hear that you've made those things separate and made them more comprehensive.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. Any other questions? I just have a question. If we approve this manual then becomes retroactive to January 2020. Is there a reason why we would, am I not accurate in that?
I would like to make it start today.
So it would be, because my question would be why not bring it in time to make it start, like, once the council has voted on it? So,
Absolutely, let's make that record. Thank you.
excellent.
In order to make it start today, we would have to change it to be an emergency ordinance, which the mayor is not here for. We had to have 4 people to do that. I think it's definitely a good idea to make it that, so maybe we
Yes.
could not vote on this until the mayor gets back and add the
I think
emergency
he'll
clause.
probably be back. Let's see if there's any public testimony. Have you completed your formal
Thank you, yes.
testimony? Carla, is there any public testimony on this issue?
Yes, we have one person, Maggie, signed up.
All right. Thank you very much. Please
Thank
hang out, and we'll see if we are able to make that change happen. Maggie, come on up. Are you declining to speak?
Maggie?
Yeah. Are you done? Okay. In that case, we could just table this until the mayor comes back for a vote and just go to the next item. And what is the next item?
We're on 185.
Is that the pleasure of my? Okay, well, so we'll just table the current item and go to the next one until the mayor returns. And we anticipate him coming back. His phone is here, so he didn't go too far. And Carla, if you'll please call the next item.
185, amend contract with HDR Engineering, Inc. for additional construction support services for the Columbia Boulevard wastewater treatment plant renewable natural gas facility, project number E10033, for $229,000.
Thank you.
Second reading.
Commissioner Fritz?
It's the second reading.
It's a second reading, okay. Any additional conversation? Mayor, we are on 186.
85.
And we're gonna, I'm sorry.
185.
185, sorry. 185, second reading, and we're calling for the vote.
Fritz?
I wasn't here for the public hearing, but my staff and I have reviewed the record. Thank you to Yesenia Carrillo on my staff. Happy to vote aye.
Hardesty?
Still.
Aye.
Udaly?
Well, I'm happy to see us move one step closer to achieving Commissioner Fish's vision. I enjoyed a congenial relationship with Commissioner Fish that involved a lot of good-natured ribbing, and I certainly got a lot of mileage out of BES in that arena, from failing sewer pipes and poop to power. But in all seriousness, I think this project puts us on the cutting edge of publicly owned renewable energy. I support this limited use capturing for on-site use, which is better than flaring. While renewable natural gas is certainly an improvement, it is an interim step toward our climate goals, and it's no substitute for a transition to clean electricity. But we might as well capture those gases that are going to be released anyway. I'd like to thank Bureau of Environmental Services staff and Asena from Commissioner Fish's office for their work on this project. I vote aye.
Wheeler?
This was a true passion of Commissioner Fish, and I'm sorry he isn't here today to see this to fruition, but he probably is, right? He's probably watching, and He's laughing about his poop to power joke. And it never gets old, does it? I want to thank him for his leadership on this and his vision in working with BES. This was great innovative thinking on the part of the folks at BES to do something really, really interesting and worthwhile to the public. And Asena Lawrence, who's here today, worked very, very hard on this issue for Commissioner Fish. And I'm glad we're just here today to have the opportunity to see it to fruition. It was a great presentation, good public testimony. I'm proud to vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. We're going to go back to item 184. It's my understanding that we're going to put an emergency clause on that. I'll entertain a motion.
I moved, well, I want to, no, we have to give a reason when it's an emergency motion, so I moved to add an emergency clause because it's in the public interest to have changes to rules go into effect immediately.
And it sounds like Commissioner, we'll give that Commissioner Hardesty as the second, if that's all right. Commissioner Udaly, please call.
Out of competition.
You got to be fast around here.
Gotta be quick, that's right.
That's why I drink the coffee. You need to have the buzz to be able to be fast. Carla, could you please call the roll on the emergency amendment?
Fritz.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The amendment's adopted to the main motion is amended. Please call the roll.
Fritz.
Excellent work on this, and I really appreciate the very thoughtful way that you've gone about doing it. As I say, you are absolutely the experts on sewer design and the public benefits because you've really have some very innovative solutions in here. Thank you both for your work, all three of you for your work. Aye.
Hardesty.
Ditto what Commissioner Fritz said. I vote aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Thanks for your hard work on this. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next item, also a second reading, item number 186, please.
Amend contract with McClure and Sons, Inc. for additional compensation to complete contract work due to design modifications and change conditions for the Columbia Boulevard wastewater treatment plant facility project number E10033 for $4,452,012.
This is a second reading. We've already heard a presentation on this item. We've taken public testimony. Is there any further business? Seeing none, Carla, if you could please call the roll.
Fritz.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next item is number 187.
Amend Revenue and Finance Code to streamline the procurement and contracting process.
So I have a brief introduction, and then I believe there'll be some amendments. Colleagues, this is a second reading of an item that we've been considering for some time now. Lester Spittler first introduced these proposed changes to the city's procurement code in March of last year, when we permanently increased his position signature authority to $1 million for goods and services, construction, and professional, technical, and expert services after a pilot period. In August of last year, we had a work session with the procurement services team. It was an interesting work session. And in the interim, Lester and his team has met with several of us and our staffs to hear potential concerns and discuss potential changes in a little more detail. As a reminder, these proposed procurement changes are intended to streamline the procurement and contracting process for the city. The city procures and contracts for hundreds of millions of dollars each and every year. Procurement Services is our central support team that ensures the city's being good stewards of the taxpayer dollars that we spend, and also making sure that we're doing so as efficiently and effectively as possible. I understand that my colleagues have a few amendments, and I'd certainly like at this point for people to introduce those amendments should they so choose.
I
Commissioner
thought that
Fritz.
they were introduced into the ordinance, and so aren't we just voting on this as a second reading?
So no.
No?
My understanding is that the amendment that I proposed, and I'm not sure about the amendment that you proposed, will need to be added today because I just found out this morning that my amendment was not included.
Well,
So what you have here is the amendment that I had recommended. I was a little frustrated as well.
this is the fifth time this has been on the council's agenda, and I was ready to vote and say, you know, how great that we've come to
Lester, could you
consensus.
come up and add some clarity to this, please?
I was a little surprised to find that out myself.
It's the sixth time, actually.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So,
Lester, what's going on?
yes.
Who are you?
Lester Spittler, the city's chief procurement officer. Thank you. So this is the first time that the amendments are being proposed after the first reading. So the first reading was on November 6th, and since then, there hasn't been an official opportunity to propose the amendments. So that's why we're doing it now.
So let's do it.
If my staff was watching in my office, could please bring in my amendments, that would be very
Let's
helpful.
take a 5-minute recess.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's find out what's going on. Tia, what's going on? just a few more minutes. We'll go to a couple, there's a second reading here, 188. Why don't we get to that?
So do we need to table?
So, yeah, 187 we'll table for a moment. We'll go to 188, please, Carla.
188, authorize an intergovernmental agreement between the Bureau of Revenue and Financial Services Procurement Services, Multnomah County, Washington County, Metro, and the Port of Portland for the development and administration of the Regional Clean Air Construction Program for approximately $136,000 annually for 7 years.
Oh, very good. Here's Commissioner Fritz already. Better hand that out.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Commissioner Fritz, I just asked Carla to read 188, which is the IGA with Metro, Multnomah County, Washington County on the administration of the Portland Clean Air Construction Program that we heard about last week. It's a second reading, and unless anybody has any objections, we'll call the roll. Carla, call the roll, please.
Fritz.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Udaly.
I just want to say I'm very supportive of this work and concerned with our air quality. Multnomah County has the worst air quality in the state, and Portland is in the top 30 worst air pollution, worst for short-term particulate pollution in the country. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
This is a great extension of the work we're already doing at the city level. We passed our own clean air construction standards. We funded it in the last budget. This expands our partnerships beyond the borders of our fair city to acknowledge that the airshed does not know borders. I'm happy to vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. And we'll go back to 187, which was open. Commissioner Fritz, would you like to propose your amendments first, please?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to the procurement staff for working with my office on this. The first is an amendment to Section 5.33.130, Emergency Procurements. It provides authority for the Chief Procurement Officer and Bureau Directors to execute contracts resulting from emergencies of any amount with Commissioner in charge of approval. That was what the Procurement Office had previously proposed. My amendment requires emergency contracts over $150,000 to be brought to council at the next possible scheduled session.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fritz and a second from Commissioner Hardesty on Fritz 1.
The second is Section 5.33.060, Authority of Directors. It leaves the current status quo of maintaining authority to grant awards of up to $5,000 with no increase.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fritz, a second from Commissioner Hardesty on Fritz 2.
Thank you. And then the last one is Section 5.33.060, Authority of Directors. Gives the authority to award, execute, amend, and terminate intergovernmental agreements up to $50,000. It's currently $5,000, and removes procurement from the intergovernmental agreement process.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fritz, a second from Commissioner Hardesty on Fritz 3. Commissioner Hardesty, you have an amendment as well.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Section 5.34.510, pre-qualification of offerers. It says the City of Portland requires pre-qualification of all prime construction contractors, except for prime construction contractors that are enrolled in the Prime Contractor Development Program. Say that 3 times fast. On public improvement contracts with an estimated value of $500,000 or greater, per ORS 279C.430 in parentheses 1, which allows public agencies the option to adopt their own rules for mandatory pre-qualifications of contractors desiring to bid for public improvement contracts led by that agency. The Chief Procurement Officer has the authority to require pre-qualification for public improvement contracts $500,000 or less. The city shall not consider a bid from a bidder that is not pre-qualified if the city required pre-qualification.
I'll second. So we have a motion from Commissioner Hardesty, a second from myself. That will be Hardesty 1. Colleagues, I'd like to introduce an amendment as well to introduce an emergency clause to this ordinance.
Second.
We have a second. The emergency is actually multifaceted. Number one, as Commissioner Fritz indicated, we've been hanging on to this for some time. We would like to get the program started as soon as possible, particularly presuming the passage of Commissioner Hardesty's amendment relative to minority contractors. I think it's important that we get this ball rolling sooner rather than later. I think there is a public benefit case to be made here that is a strong one. So I move an emergency clause.
Commissioner Hardesty seconded.
And Commissioner Hardesty is seconded. That's Wheeler 1. So with all of that, is there any further, we'll open this up to public testimony because there's some new amendments. Would anybody like to testify on any of these particular amendments? Come on up. And if you could introduce your name for the record again. Good morning.
Good morning. Charles Bridge Crane Johnson for the record. Thank you, Madam President Hardesty, Mayor Wheeler, and Fritz and Mr. Daly being left out of the amendment game there, but I think one thing that I think would be even more comfortable for the public when you're approving this as an emergency is, well, first of all, when the charter review comes, we really should develop some new language that distinguishes just urgency from emergency. It's urgent to do things in the public benefit. It's an emergency when one of the bridges falls into the river. Or, maybe also, I haven't been here earlier in the day, San Francisco considers the coronavirus an emergency. That's different than just tweaking the procurement rules to go up to $1 million of buying power for the chief procurement officer. The amendments, I think, make it even better. The overall, in the interest of good governance, it would have been, when you're saying it's an emergency, it would have been better if the staff that did the initial documentation and the 3 exhibits that are available online had said how many items in this interim would have been streamlined. Is there only 2 items in 4 months or 5 months that would benefit from this streamlined process? Then it's not a big cost savings. If there were 29 items, unfortunately I have not gone deeply into the budget to know what percentage of our city's awarded contracts hit the $1 million threshold. But when we elect y'all, whether it's by 100,000 votes or 150,000 votes, we definitely want you to be able to be kind of fluent with that language about who are the biggest contractors, where do the various threshold levels fall. But I know you are being attentive to that, and I think these amendments make this stronger, so it's not too hard to swallow the emergency language. Thank you all.
Thank you. Commissioner Hardesty, did you
Thank
have a
you.
comment?
I just wanted to respond to Charles' question. Charles, just so you know, when I first got here, that emergency clause made me a bit batty because it appeared that just about everything that we did was an emergency. In this particular case, however, I feel that the procurement office has done their due diligence by reaching out and really trying to reach agreement with the other council offices, and this has been going on for quite some time. And so for me, the reason I'm supporting an emergency is because I want them to actually go and get those contracts out the door rather than continuing to come back to council trying to seek agreement, right? I think we've got agreement, so let's just move it because the value system is the same. The question is how we get there.
Thank you, Madam President, and all y'all.
Very good.
And just to note that I did ask the 2011 Charter Commission to look at that issue, and the Charter Commission decided not to. So that's how the process works. We'll be having another Charter Commission next year, and I encourage you as a community member, we don't get to tell the Charter Commission what to do. You do. So I encourage you to make that point again, please.
Very good. I agree. The nomenclature is confusing on that one. All right, very good. So we will take votes on the amendments first, then to the main motion. First up is Fritz number 1 relating to emergency procurements. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Fritz?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment is adopted. Fritz 2, which is related to the authority of directors.
Fritz?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Happy to support. I vote aye. The amendment's adopted. Fritz, number 3, related also to the authority of directors.
Fritz?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment is adopted. Now to Hardesty 1, related to pre-qualification and prime contracting, amongst other things. Call the roll.
Fritz?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment is adopted. We'll go to the main motion first. And, well, let me think about that for a second. Yeah, I'll take my chances. Let's go ahead and vote on Wheeler 1, the addition of the emergency clause.
Fritz?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment is adopted. To the main motion is amended.
Fritz?
Wow, I'm very glad we get to vote on this today. Thank you very much to Procurement Services for all the work that you've done, for Tim Crail and Claire Adamsick and my staff for all the work that they've done. As a reminder, this is the 6th time we've had this on the council agenda. When we had it the 5th time on the 18th of December, the vote then was 2-2, and because Commissioner Fish was out on his final leave. And Commissioner Hardesty and I both had concerns, but in different sections of the code. And Mayor Wheeler could have dealt with just one of us and made one of us happy to pass something 3-1. And you didn't do that, Mayor Wheeler. You really wanted to get to consensus on this. And I appreciate that, because it is... we have 4, and soon to be again 5, different perspectives. We're intelligent people who look at things that, we got limited public testimony on in any of the 6 hearings, I would have to say. But we and our staff do our due diligence and dig into, is this the appropriate amount of authority? Who gets the authority? And so I appreciate, Mayor Wheeler, that you have taken the time to make sure that everybody had input and that we can all support it. And I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Aye.
Hardesty?
Nice of you. Thank you.
I also want to appreciate Lester. I'm sure Lester was pulling his hair out at some point in this process and wondering if we would ever get to a vote on this particular issue. But I absolutely agree with everything that Commissioner Fritz said. It's important to me that we do it right rather than fast. It's important to me that we actually are able to get dialogue and figure out kind of what is the values that we're trying to push forward when we make these changes happen. And I think all of us agree that the buck does stop with us here on the city council, and we don't want to delegate that authority to any department heads any more than we absolutely need to. Because at the end of the day, the voters will be asking us why we made decisions that we made, and we need to be able to stand behind those decisions. I also want to applaud Mayor Wheeler, because he did, in fact, spend a lot more time than I'm sure he thought he would spend, actually having conversations about how this process would work. The good thing about having 5 distinct voices is you have 5 distinct perspectives, and the goal is always to get to agreement. Some days we just agree that we're not going to get there. I'm happy today is not one of those days, and I'm very excited to vote aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Well, this was more complicated than I think people realize, but it was also more interesting than I expected it to be. And Lester, thank you for your patience on this. I think you proved yourself very worthy of the title that you carry as director, and you listened intently to what people were saying. And frankly, I've learned a lot over the course of this process. So I thought it was a good conversation. I learned more about some of the finer points of procurement that I hadn't fully considered previously. I think my colleagues chiming in with various perspectives, I think shed light on parts of the code that maybe the city council hadn't thought about in great detail previously. And so I see this as a collaborative effort to move the ball forward. I'm really happy with it. Thank you, colleagues. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted as amended. Thank you. Next up, 189, Parks and Recreation.
authorize Portland Parks and Recreation to transfer $60,000 and the Bureau of Environmental Services to transfer $260,000 to the Peninsula Drainage District Number 1 for operational and capital expenses in fiscal year 2019-20.
Colleagues, as we all know, the North Portland area is protected from the Columbia River flooding by a series of levees. Peninsula Drainage District Number 1, or PEN 1, is the westernmost of 4 drainage districts located in Multnomah County. The 4 separate districts are expected to be replaced in this next several years by a new single urban flood safety and water quality district that will use a different funding model. But in the meanwhile, PEN 1 has a funding gap resulting from property tax compression caused by what I will describe as Oregon's unique property tax system. This ordinance authorizes 2 one-time contributions. First, Parks will fund $60,000 of general operating support because Parks is also the largest landowner in PEN 1 at 77% of the district's total area. Second, BES, the Bureau of Environmental Services, will fund $260,000 of capital maintenance to aid in executing an existing intergovernmental agreement to manage stormwater in the district. This additional funding will directly benefit our stormwater management system. And we know that relevant budget directors and, of course, the city budget office are all working to identify a path forward to support PEN 1 until the new district is ultimately formed. I'll now turn it over to Claudio Campuzano, who's our finance manager at Parks, and Jonas Beery, who's the business operations manager at the Bureau of Environmental Services. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here, and thank you for your patience. And I hope you're learning a lot today on other subjects.
Absolutely. Good morning, Claudio
Morning.
Campuzano, Finance Property Technology Manager for Parks. I think the mayor summarized the nature of the ordinance well. To address the request from Peninsula One Drainage District in the fall, the directors from Portland Parks and Recreation, Environmental Services, the city budget, and the chief administrative officer. We all met with representatives from PEN 1 and identified some resources to tide them through this current fiscal year, and this action would authorize those transfers of budgeted one-time resources. I do just want to note that this, while this action addresses the current near-term issues for this fiscal year, the solvency challenge will continue in PEN 1. And to that end, the district has made a request through the special appropriations process for fiscal year 2021. And so I believe you'll be addressing that longer-term need over the next couple of weeks. But as I said, this action merely authorizes the entering into the agreement for the current fiscal year funding that was identified in the fall bump. So at this point, happy to take any questions.
Nothing.
Very good. Do we have any public testimony on this item?
Yes, we have
Thanks,
2
Joan.
people signed up, Maggie and Charles Bridgecrane Johnson.
Good morning again, Commissioners. Charles Bridgecrane Johnson for the record, and I want to thank you for that pretty clarifying explanation of PEN 1. I didn't have time to look at the different resources of the city, but when we're in this situation where the other local governments that we sometimes IGA with, Metro Regional Government is looking to give us maybe $300 million of annually renewable aid to homelessness, and then in this fall, billions of dollars of transportation spending. I hope that the city and the Legislative Affairs Office will make it easier to find more information on the potential resolutions for changing this drainage district situation for PEN 1. That whole area, while it's within the city limits of Portland, is really part of regional safety and stability. So I think the Legislative Affairs Office needs to be looking at how, even though we hate state preemption, what kind of structures do the public need to be engaging with all of our elected officials about so that PEN 1 and these other districts can be put into something that doesn't take away from our Parks Department. It's really sad to see even $60,000 leave a Parks Bureau that had to lay people off and close community pools. So I look forward to engaging with all of us constituents about a fix. We didn't hear about a specific amount that's already been requested. I think it was Director Claudio mentioned that they're preparing for next year, but I didn't hear whether it was going to be a similar amount or a bigger chunk of pie that might go out of parks and other bureaus. But thanks for making this clear and doing what we're obligated to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good morning.
Okay, Maggie, Portland Homeless Town Hall. And normally I would agree with Charles about the Parks Department not getting money taken away. But frankly, if they would just stop their Jim Crow behavior around the bathrooms and the homeless, I mean, taxpayers pay for the parks. Homeless people should be able to use the bathroom. So deal with that situation and then stop taking money from the parks. As far as like drainage systems, I would guess I would want to say to people to be really concerned about pesticides and chemicals, and if people are peeing and pooping on the streets, well, guess what? That's all going down the storage drain. So there you go.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Any further discussion? Very good. Carla, please call the roll. It's an emergency item.
Fritz,
Thank you for your work. Aye.
Hardesty,
I want to remind folks that the city council in its wisdom actually set aside this money in the fall bump for this, so it's not like we're taking it out of Parks operating budget. So just want to make sure that's on the record. I vote aye.
Udaly,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you for your good work on this. Next item is item 190.
Approve application under the Multiple Unit Limited Tax Exemption Program under the Inclusionary Housing Program for 82nd Avenue multi-use located at 1750 Northeast 82nd Avenue.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Dory Van Bockel, the Development Incentives Program Manager. Welcome.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here.
Barely. Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners, my name is Dory Van Bockel with Portland Housing Bureau. And we are here with yet another tax exemption to help incentivize inclusionary housing success with this particular project, providing 5 of the 78 units affordable for 99 years at 60% of median family income. It will be the 79th project with close to 600 units of private development that we've achieved with this program so far. I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Commissioner Hardesty has a question.
Thank you. Would you give me that data again? It was how many units at 60% of MFI?
For this particular project, it is 5.
5 units. And what's the total amount of units that are going up on this property?
78.
So 78 units, and we're going to get 5 at a 60% of MFI. And so what is that income level? What is the income restrictions for folks who would qualify for that property?
I believe for a family of 4, it's around 48,000. I don't have the numbers at the top of my head, but.
And do we know what size the units are that will be available
This
for
is a
folks at
mix.
60%?
Yeah, it's a mix of primarily studio and 1-bedroom units, and there's 2 2-bedroom units in the building, so one of those will be affordable.
So, Mayor, I will say that I'm just really not that satisfied with this particular program because it feels like we get a drop in the bucket. We're doing nothing to address really family units in this process. And no disrespect to you and the work that you've done on this particular project, but I think it's time for us to actually look at this program and find out if we're really getting the benefit that we think that we're getting from this particular housing effort. As I've sit here and continue to approve these, 3 here, 4 here, most of them are studios, most of them are 1 incomes, and if there's a 70-unit apartment complex that's being built, in a community that may or may not be gentrifying, I am concerned about how those people get access to food and whatever their self-care products are in that community. And so I just feel like we just keep doing these as nickel and dimes, but if we're not looking at the big picture and figuring out, are we really having an impact, or is there a better way for us to use our tax exemption opportunities to really have much more significant impact? Because I, as a whole, I'm just not seeing that we're getting the return that we desperately need on these kind of projects.
Very good. Dory, how would you respond to that?
Well, in a couple of ways. One is that outside of the central city, projects are only required to provide 8% of the total units if they're provided at the 60% MFI level or below. And so that's part of a program policy that was in place that will expire actually in another year or so. And after that time, the requirement will go up to 10% as it is in the rest of the city. And the same as for 80% units, we put in a temporary policy of 15% that will go to 20 throughout the city. And that was implemented by council as a means to ensure that the program did have some success and to help balance the amount of subsidy that developers do have to account for in providing the affordable units for 99 years. And so certainly it is a balance that we're looking at and we'll continue to look at with the program. And so that's one of the considerations that council can take in the future as to whether or not we'd want to extend or let that part, sail.
Commissioner Fritz.
I guess I had a different way of reading the data that I have. We're getting 5 units, three studios, one bedroom, one 2-bedroom, at a cost of reduced property taxes of $22,787 over 10 years. So that's getting 5 units for, $2,200 at the cost of $2,200. That seems like a lot cheaper than other things. And isn't this set by state law as to how much we can require?
Yes, it is. Or at least that we cannot require more than 20% at 80% is the state requirement.
20%, 80%, and so we provide the other incentive to get it down.
Yes. Yeah, and so there are tax incentives provided outside of the central city. It's true that the building only receives exemptions for the affordable units, so it's not a big amount on this particular project. And that's because the cost of construction is lower for a project outside of the central city. It's, when we're getting into the central city with concrete, larger steel projects, then certainly that's why the decision in the development of the program was made to exempt all of the units in the building because to outweigh the costs. So in this particular project, there's only a total over 10 years of an estimated $70,000 of tax exemption provided for the 99 years that we'll receive of affordability out of those 5 units. There is a small amount of SDCs that will be exempted only for those 5 units, as well as a small reduction to the construction excise tax for those 5 units as well.
Commissioner Daly? Oh, sorry. Commissioner Hardesty, did you have another question?
So at some point, I suspect we're going to have a full report since the anticipated conclusion of this particular, you said that the exemption would change at the end of next year, right? So this would sunset?
Yes, as far as the required percentage of affordable units in each project, yes.
So I would really look forward to having a more detailed conversation about whether or not these nickel and dime developments really are helping us change the outcomes for folks in our community. And though I appreciate that the tax exemption is just for those units, I'm thinking about the people who are living in those units and whether or not those individuals are isolated, whether or not they're getting their needs met in those neighborhoods where those units are going up. And again, when you have 70 units and only 3 of them are quote unquote affordable, and we all know that that's not even affordable at 60% of MFI, because basically we're talking an individual, and an individual would have to make, $40,000, $45,000 in order to qualify for this unit, for these quote-unquote affordable units. And what we know is that people who are working 2 and 3 full-time minimum wage jobs don't qualify for those units at 60% of MFI. So I'm not saying it doesn't impact somebody, but what I'm saying is whether or not we're putting our resources in the right place to have the biggest impact for the most number of people. And every time I see these things, I'm left with that question. So thank you. Appreciate you being here. And again, nothing about this particular project, nothing about the presentation, but just overall as a policy, as a council, I think we have to reevaluate every step of the way, whether or not we're getting a good return on our investment. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there any public testimony on this item, Carla?
Yes, Maggie and Charles Bridge Green Johnson.
Good afternoon.
I'll take your word for it. Good afternoon. So I think that one thing that would, I know you're just always dying to hear me tell you how to be even better than the awesomeness you're doing. The best way to describe this location was to say 10 blocks south of Madison High School. Madison High School isn't really high schooling right now. It's on reconstruction. But it's an interesting balance between the point that Commissioner Fritz raised, that we're only waiving $22,000-ish in property taxes, and yet we're getting 70-some apartments, and 8% of those will be set aside for people that are going to be at 60% of MFI. It's interesting to wonder where the rest of the people who are going to be paying market rate rents but aren't making 100% of MFI are going to come from. So this location, I don't know. I know that the police raided a house not very far from this because of some activity to stop fascists in here. There's a park relatively close to this neighborhood. So I'm glad that we're doing something, but I do think that in addition to all the hard work the Housing Bureau and our Home Forward already have to do, Commissioner Hardesty's, Madam President Hardesty's questions really resonate with me of, okay, we're looking at these 5 units cut out to reach these 60% MFI people, but what's really going on in that neighborhood? On other agenda items, I think there was a project in Cully. The presenters talked about the diversity of that neighborhood and the different income levels that those people fell in, along with the information about what ethnicities were more common or less common in those neighborhoods. And I think that even though this is a small amount of money, $22,000, if we're really going to serve the people who have desperate and severe needs, it would help if the Housing Bureau could give us a little bit extra data about the big picture. And the testimony left it unclear as to whether the sunsetting of the 8% cap means that the 10% cap is going to spread to cover the whole city, or whether there's going to be no multi-coverage outside of the inner core of the city. So I hope that you all have some clarity or could share that with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And 60% MFI is what, about $53,000? So they're going to start with people who make $53,000. People on Social Security aren't getting $53,000 a year. People like me, they don't get $53,000 a year. That's why we're homeless. So I would say that having gone through 20 pages of government property and looking at subsidized housing and Section 8, and knowing that, again, I will use the words I used at Metro, any rich jerk can go out and buy these contractor housing, and they can put in any manager, and those managers can be abusive to disabled people, Black people, females, and gender, race, LGBTQ, and those people can be out on the street because they want to do something else with that. And I want us to get properties and put in managers that are going to have people who've been marginalized by society and are not socially connected and don't have power and are going to help them stay in their housing or get their housing, because with an 80% compliance rate according to the contract, with them not even meeting 80% compliance rate, and then HUD looking the other way and saying, oh, you don't want to meet your compliance rates, and having a year to make their compliance rate, and year after year after year, they never meet their compliance to put people into housing, you know, the number of the equity targets that they're supposed to meet year after year after year. They don't meet them, and HUD looks the other way. And this is why we end up with a homeless problem. Okay?
Thank you. Appreciate it. This is an emergency ordinance. Carla, please call the roll.
Fritz.
Thank you for your work. Aye.
Hardesty.
And so I also appreciate us trying to do everything we can to improve opportunities for low-income folks to get housing. Just not sure this is the program that's actually going to help us make it happen. I vote aye today, but I'm going to be looking at these as these continue to come in front of us here at City Council. I'm going to continue to be asking really hard questions, because I really think it's important to not say that we're building housing that people can afford to live in if we're saying it's at 60% of MFI, and that's somewhere between $45,000 and $55,000 for an individual. I just don't think that we can actually, with a straight face, call that housing that people can afford to live in. So I vote aye.
Udaley.
Well, I want to thank you for your work, and I feel like we need to clarify a couple issues. There's a limit to what we can compel private developers to do. And so programs like inclusionary zoning and multi are designed to either require or incentivize affordable housing at the 60-80% level, which, while that does not serve the lowest income individuals in our community, it certainly does help fill a massive gap that exists in that income segment. We need to do this as much as possible so that we can devote our public dollars to serving those who earn 0 to 30%, which has to be our priority for public dollars. So I'm very interested in the conversation as to whether or not we're getting a good return on our investment, which is the tax abatement. No. No.
No, Maggie, testimony
We are
is over.
voting.
No,
No,
testimony is over.
you-
I've called the roll. You cannot interrupt. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really unhelpful and disruptive. So I think, like Commissioner Hardesty, I'm very interested in an analysis of what we are getting for that gift of a tax abatement, because I know it's a more complex equation than 10 years of tax abatement for X number of affordability years. So I'm happy to support it, interested in more conversation. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Good conversation, good discussion. And Dory, if you could reach out to my fellow commissioners' offices and give them the opportunity to ask further questions, that would be helpful. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you. Next item is 191.
Amend the Open and Accountable Elections Program to permit the director to reduce the total public contribution for special elections if the amount in the Open and Accountable Elections Fund is insufficient.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an amendment to the Open and Accountable Elections Code to give the program more flexibility in how to handle a budget shortfall for special elections. The program is fully funded for the regularly scheduled elections this year, all 3 of them, and will be providing donors with the full 6-to-1 match and the full match caps through November 2nd, 2020. Special elections are by nature unanticipated and therefore not budgeted for in the regular budgeting process. And I think that's, as we continue to develop this program, we're going to need to look at the allocations. I was thinking back to 2008 when there was a special election left by Commissioner Sten's resignation, which Commissioner Fish won. There was plenty of money in the voter-owned elections account at that time, so much so that we raided it in 2009 and 2010 during the recession. I think we hit the budget correctly for the scheduled elections, but the special elections are rare, and we hope they continue to be so. There are 13 candidates participating in the special nominating election on May 19th. This is creating a potential shortfall in the Open and Accountable Elections Fund. The Open and Accountable Election Code currently allows the director to reduce the match rate from 6-to-1 in the case of a shortfall. We believe it would be more predictable for the city to instead lower the match cap, the total that each participating candidate can receive in matching funds, instead of the match rate. It would also be less disruptive to candidates' fundraising strategies, and we have received feedback from candidates that they support this change, and Director Mote has done an excellent job of reaching out to all of the candidates running. It's also easy for the public to understand how the Open and Accountable Election Program works if the match rate of 6-to-1 is the same across all races, not 6-to-1 for the regularly scheduled election and lower for the special election. This amendment would allow the program to lower the match cap for special elections instead of the match rate for special, instead of or as well, or would it be either or just?
It gives the director the discretion to lower the match cap in special elections. It doesn't, I suppose, specifically say instead of the match rate, so I suppose both could be done, though I've promised people.
This is, well, for this particular case, right. And by design, the director of the Open and Accountable Elections Program has significant autonomy and authority to set the rules, to wall it off as much as possible from the council, while the auditor continues to not want to have it in her portfolio. So with that, I will give it to, pass the mic to Director Susan Mote.
I don't have anything to add, although I'm here to answer anyone's questions.
Commissioner Hardesty has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to absolutely compliment Susan. You know, we were all a bit nervous before we launched the Open and Accountable Elections Program. We were not nervous because we didn't believe in the program. We were nervous because we were up against some very, very tight timelines. And I just want to take this moment to publicly appreciate the fact that I've heard not one complaint this election cycle about either lack of information, lack of understanding, lack of process. And I know that means that you and your staff have been working overtime to share information and make sure that everyone has access to the information. So I just want to applaud you. I was like, I sat here and I just thought it's just not going to be possible, not in this short time period. We had the Technology Oversight Advisory Committee having confidence in you and your team, but also acknowledging it's a really, really, really tight timeline. And then we were, and then we added a new wrinkle with a special election thrown into the mix that none of us had anticipated. I just want you to know how grateful I am for you and your staff and the incredible work that you've done to get us to this point. I have every confidence that this will be one of the best public finance election cycles in the history of Oregon, and it is because of your due diligence in this process. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank Commissioner Fritz for her vision, for her leadership, because we would have never even been talking about this again had Commissioner Fritz not had the vision and created the community process to lead us to this effort. So, job well done.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. I appreciate that. I will also just state for the record that since this only applies to special elections, all 4 of us are eligible to vote on it without any conflict of interest.
It's good to know that.
Very good. Thank you. Is there any public testimony on this item, Carla?
Yes, Maggie, Charles Bridgecrane Johnson, and Shedrick Wilkins.
Can we go to 2 minutes, please, just because I want to make sure we get through our agenda?
And we're hungry.
I won't be too hard about it, but if you can try and stay in the 2-minute time frame, we'd appreciate it.
Go ahead, Judge.
Shedrick, you want to start?
Since this applies to special elections, I didn't know that. But I will say this about campaign limitations on contributions. In the year 2018, Newt Buchner ran against Kate Brown for governor. And what happened with him is he was trying to say he got a $500,000 contribution from Nike, which actually has jobs when President Trump is saying, "Made in America." Right? And so I want to know that, right? Another one is on 105, Newt Buchner decides he's going to agree, Dr. Newt Buchner is going to agree with President Trump that we need immigration reform, right? So, but actually, this caused no on 105, which was racial profiling, right? So again, and in this whole process, I met Commissioner Hardesty at the no on 105, which was actually, so getting money from rich people indicates to me that they're having inconsistent philosophies, right? It's not the other way around that they're buying the election. And by the way, I just found out, I think that the $50 billion Bloomberg didn't get that many votes and he dropped out.
Good afternoon.
I agree. Citizens United was, bound to be a bad thing, and here we are. And it's mostly what I want to know is who contributed to which politicians so that I can make an informed choice about when I'm voting. I want to know, where does that politician's loyalty lie? And what I notice about wealthy people or corporations is that they tend to be apolitical or agnostic, and they're just going to ply the person with money. It's like an athlete and sponsorship. Oh, we're going to go with this politician and he's going to wear our hat and he or she is going to be our guy. Or, and it doesn't matter, Republican or Democrat, these people will just, whoever they think is, going to be in there, they're going to ply that person with money. And you guys are in a weak position where you need the money to go out and campaign or whatever. And it makes it hard for voters to figure out who to vote for.
So Maggie, it's really easy for you to figure out who gives us money. There's a system called ORSTAR, which is set up with the Secretary of State in Oregon, and you don't have to be anybody with any special knowledge to actually use ORSTAR. You can track every dollar that comes into every campaign. The only exception is donations under $50 are normally put all together, right? But other than that, it's open to the public. It is there for the public to be able to hold elected leaders accountable.
Yeah,
And it's even easier for the Open and Accountable Elections Program because you can go on the city's website and you can see all of the donations, including the $5 ones. And you can even look at the map of where they've come from. But you're absolutely right, Maggie, that the perception of influence is one of the problems, I think, with trusting government. And that was one of the reasons that we set up this program. So it truly would be open and accountable to you, the people.
right, because otherwise we're just deceiving the voters.
Yeah.
So,
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Madam President of the Council, Commissioner Udaley, Commissioner Fritz. It was good that we touched on the fact that for Commissioner Fish's seat, there is 13, I think, registered candidates. And definitely appreciate Commissioner Fritz's comments about the city's election website, because as we sit here and people can, when they see the picture, it gets confusing to remember to call things Commissioner Fish's seat or position 4. Are you actually seated position 1, position 2, position 3, position 4? Because you can see Amanda Fritz is shaking her head.
I asked the Charter Commission to change that too, and they decided not to.
So perhaps, especially in an election year, it would even be appropriate if we have this lovely 6 to 8 inch newish sign, if there was a number next to the seat, because I don't remember in the voter pamphlet and what we deal with, but you know, I know there's a race for Udaley's seat, but I can't remember what position is. So if somebody says the people running for position X, I can't remember if they're running for Commissioner Fish's special election seat or whether they're in the goofy decisions of Sam Adams challenging Commissioner Udaley. So there's that. And then on the nuts and bolts of the money, it would be interesting if publicly financed candidates running for the open seat are capped and get less money than is available to Commissioner Udaley and the challengers for those seats. We didn't hear any specific numbers about direct impact, and I don't know if those have been cooked up yet, for lack of a better term. Deeply and seriously analyzed with highest ethics. So if that information is available, or if there could be maybe a subsidiary report about the dollar and cents impact on the website. Thanks very much.
That actually comes next week. We'll be discussing the amount of money that we're going to allocate for the special election, and there'll be a time certain next week.
This sounds so good. You can call it an emergency or not, as suits you. I bet it is.
It is. Yeah. Because it is.
Of course.
All right, thank you both. This is, and Shedrick as well. This is an emergency ordinance. Carla, please call the roll.
Fritz.
I can't stop smiling. This is a really great thing that the City of Portland is doing, that the council is funding. Director Susan Mote and Daniel Leakout, you've just done amazing, amazing work, as Commissioner Hardesty said. Our partners at Civic Software Foundation have delivered a wonderful project and system that works really well. You can go to the Open and Accountable Elections website and find all manner of different information about donations, where they come from, and it's an ongoing system. So it's not like you're one and done, you make your 1,000 donations as it was under voter-owned elections and you get a lump sum. You have to keep fundraising, which means you have to keep talking to people, you have to keep expanding the sphere of influence, and that's really how elections should work. So I'm really happy with this. I think this is a very elegant solution. Thank you to the Mayor's Office, Christian Dennis, for suggesting that this would be a good way to do it. As I just mentioned, we'll have a discussion next week about how much of the contingency money that we're able to allocate for the special election. But regardless, it's giving candidates a choice. And it is a voluntary program. People don't have to use it, but it's meaning that we're going to overall reduce the amount of money that is spent on elections so that people can donate to good things like DePaul treatment clinics and other good services instead of needing to spend so much money on council elections. You do need a lot of money to run for the city council because it is citywide. I, of course, am a very strong proponent of running citywide because I want to be able to care about all parts of the city and not only the place where I live. So I'm happy that we're then providing this program, which means that anybody, a registered nurse, a retired registered nurse could run with public financing and win election to the city council. And thank you very much to all of my colleagues for your support on this. And thanks to Tim Crail and previously Christina Nieves on my staff, who helped get the ordinance passed in 2016. She's now working with Kate Titus at Common Cause as the assistant director there. So I'm very happy to see her continuing the good work, and she's very excited too. Aye.
Hardesty?
I think I said everything I wanted to say about this. I want to also, I guess, just add how excited I am to see so much community interest, to see the diversity of candidates who are stepping up, who probably never saw themselves running for public office prior to the opportunity that the open and accountable elections presented for them. I've talked to many candidates who said, that, oh my gosh, it just is so freeing to not have people demanding that you spend hours every day on the phone raising money so that your voice can be heard. It is absolutely vital that we invest in a public system so that we know that the candidates who represent us, whether or not they choose to use the public system, are candidates that are truly representing what's in the public's interest. I am very happy to vote aye.
Udaley.
Well, I want to point out that you are looking at the 7th, 8th, and 9th women to ever be elected to Portland City Council in our over 100-year history, as well as the first woman of color to ever be elected to City Council. Although we beat the odds to win our seats, I think it is incumbent upon us to continue opening the doors wider to women and candidates of color and other underrepresented and underserved community members. I am a huge fan of campaign finance reform and getting corporate money out of politics. I would like to see a ban of corporate contributions in all federal, well, in all elections, frankly, an overturn of Citizens United, and real transparency and accountability in our elections. I'm so thankful to Commissioner Fritz for advancing this program, and to Susan and Daniel, who have done a great job standing this program up in a short period of time. Now we just need to find a permanent home for it. I hope to help in any way I can with that conversation moving forward, and I happily vote aye.
Wheeler.
I want to thank Commissioner Fritz for her both persistence and her passion on this issue, and working with Director Mote and others to make sure that this is a successful program. Well done, Commissioner, and I'm happy to support this. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted.
I literally have chills. This is so great. Thank you.
This is very cool.
And I believe, oh yes, so the next item, we're going to move it. Do you want to read it, Carla, 192?
Authorize a support and maintenance gap contract with Versaterm, Inc. for the computer-aided dispatch system used by the Bureau of Emergency Communications, not to exceed $2 million.
And we are moving that to 2 p.m. per the Tuesday memo, so that the director can participate in that. So if people want to hear that this afternoon, 2 p.m. Portland City Council, be there. We are adjourned.
Cool. 12:30.
Convertible notification, confirming a time certain for the North Northeast Housing Strategy Report. When is the time certain? 10 a.m. when? Perfect. I have verbally confirmed. Great. I'm not hearing anybody in the council chambers standing up and yelling, I object.
Wait, I'll object. Oh, too late, he's gone.
I'm out of here. See you later, brothers and sisters.
It's Wheel. Oh, man, I stopped.
Have tracks, will travel.
All right.